Arya spends some coin, Jon is still a bastard, and Dany loses her head. Well, a head anyway. Tonight we're discussing Game of Thrones 502, The House of Black and White, on What's on the Box! Hi everybody, I'm James.
And I'm James.
And this is What's on the Box, where we discuss the latest episode of your favorite TV show.
This week we're talking about the second episode of Game of Thrones' 5th season, The House of Black and White. It's a very good episode.
They set the table last week, and tonight, dinner is served. Like last week, we touched up on a whole lot of storylines, but there was way more action this week. I mean, right off the bat, you get Brienne confronting Sansa and Littlefinger. She found Sansa. We all thought last week was just a cruel joke, that pan over from Brienne to the wagon. We thought that that was the closest Brienne would ever come to Sansa, but no, she actually found her.
When she pledges herself to Sansa that way, that really sets up the whole theme, I think, for this episode, which is one of choice. When Sansa does turn down Brienne's offer, she says that you knelt before Joffrey, and Brienne says, well, I didn't want to be there either, we didn't have a choice.
Sometimes we do.
I think Sansa is implying that Sansa herself has a choice and that she's choosing to be with Littlefinger.
I agree. Sansa, who is a character who has not had a lot of choices or ability to make choices, makes one for herself. She chooses to be with Littlefinger. There's this whole running theme of what's the right choice to make. Did I make the right choice? Game of Thrones, for being such a plot-driven show, is at its best when it does have these kind of thematic elements that tie all the stories together, and that's why I think tonight was such a great episode.
One last thing before we move on from Brienne. It's just so heartbreaking for Brienne that both Stark girls that she spent so long and so much effort finding have rejected what was her driving force in her life. Brienne defines herself by her oaths and by her pledges, and now she just discovered that her oath isn't wanted. And Pod calls her out on it, and he says, hey, if they don't want it, they don't want it. But Brienne grills Pod, do you actually think that Sansa is safe with Littlefinger? And he admits no. So whether or not Sansa wants it, Brienne is sticking to her oath.
I think that it's very telling for who Brienne is as a character that she chooses to stay on this same path of honor and loyalty and all these things that have defined her thus far. Take that and contrast it with somebody like Jaime. I think that Jaime's choice to go to Dorne to rescue Myrcella,
With Count Bronn, he looks like a count.
he does look like a count, is one born of that scene from last season with Joffrey in the Kingsguard Tower, where it's like, where are the deeds of Jaime Lannister? And there are none. He's the Kingslayer, he's the Oathbreaker, he's human garbage, and now even Cersei hates him. His choice to go to Dorne to reclaim some sense of the man that he wants to be is really important for that character and a big step forward. I'm really excited for Jaime and Bronn.
Yeah, give it to me.
Jerome Flynn is so fantastic. He just continues to be awesome. That scene with lollies on the beach, he's just absent-minded, but he plays it so perfect and still charming.
Yeah, like when she finally gets his attention, there's no visible anger at her. There's no belittling. He's like, oh.
Yeah, he's nice to her, really.
But then, in the same breath, he plots to murder her sister.
People like your sister, you always get what's coming to them, eventually.
Well, of course.
He is.
That's a nice castle.
That is a nice castle.
Like, it's like not too big, it's on the beach.
There's a Whole Foods within walking distance.
It's in a really good school district. Like, I would totally murder a sister to live there.
So while Jaime's going to Dorne, Cersei's trying to take control in King's Landing.
Oh yeah, the small council scene.
Yeah, I love small council stuff. I love it.
It loses something without Littlefinger and Varys.
It's an entirely different small council,
Yeah.
Except for Pycelle, who continues to just get shat on by Cersei. Remember last week when Cersei told Jaime that the threat to their power wouldn't come from without the family, it would come from within, referencing Tyrion. Maybe she was right, but in regards to Kevin Lannister, because he's the one who's putting his foot down and saying, not my queen.
That small council scene is really interesting, especially considering it comes after we see Dany's small council, where we have a group of men respectfully advising a female ruler. Each one of those men gives their opinion in an honest, well thought out way.
That is a good contrast.
Yeah,
to
and
Cersei's small council, who is either just yes-manning her or disrespecting her.
the advice that she gets from Barristan, I think, is really important.
That's a great scene. Barristan really showing his wisdom. The reason why he's maybe the most valuable advisor to her is just so much life experience and history resides within him.
The fact that Dany can take Barristan insulting her family, insulting her father, confirming all these horrible things that she believed to be lies growing up, and then go, oh, you have a point. I need to change the way that I rule. The fact that she chooses justice and mercy over a swift, vengeful decision bodes well for Daenerys Targaryen as a ruler.
And let's not forget who dismissed Barristan in the first place.
Cersei.
Yeah.
I don't think that she fucked up. No, she made the only choice there was to make. What was she supposed to do? She said, we're going to try this other guy for murder and he's going to be executed. Then they catch another person for murder and he has to be executed. She's following her own laws.
Yeah.
But the problem is that on Game of Thrones, when you cut off somebody's head, bad things happen to you.
Yeah, she just pulled a Robb Stark. His good fortune went downhill real fast after executing Karstark.
I think that she's found herself in an unfortunate decision, but the choice that she made was the correct one. She's already proving herself to be a more just ruler than everybody we've seen except for Tyrion and Ned.
And Doran Martell, who says we do not massacre little girls in Dorne.
That scene with Dorne and Arya has a lot of exposition in it, but the way that they hide the exposition in drama and character-driven conversation is so fantastic. And it also continues this theme of choices. Arya wants to go to war over Oberyn. Doran chooses peace, and in that choice illustrates exactly who he is as a character. And in that one scene, we know so much about Dorne that it's fine that this is a new setting. We got it.
Before we move on from Dany, we have to mention Drogon.
Yeah, absolutely. He looks amazing. It was great. It was so exciting. Drogon also is much kinder to Dany than the other two. So I think that there's something to be said, keeping with the larger themes of her story, of freedom and confinement and what that can do to a soul.
Aw, dragons have souls?
All dragons go to heaven.
Before we get into the last big story, let's talk about Arya.
She's back.
Yeah!
Everybody's favorite little murderer.
She's a little psychopath.
And she would have killed those kids.
You think so?
Oh, yeah.
But you know who saved them? Chakanaga.
Pinot Noir. But we also learned that Jack and Hagar is no one.
No one.
And that a girl must become no one too.
Let's see if she does it.
I'm looking forward to the Rocky training montages to come.
Well, that just leaves our good friend, Jon Snow.
Jon Snow.
Jon Snow.
Jon Snow.
We can't do this every time.
I know.
Jon Snow.
We get a useless scene with Sam and Gilly and Shireen.
Maybe not, because we spend a lot of time talking about grayscale.
That's true. Once we get past that, we have some really interesting happenings at the Wall.
We get some great scenes, but one of them irks me, and that is the fact that Jon is offered by Stannis to become a Stark, and immediately he tells Sam he's not gonna do it.
He says to Sam, like, it's the first thing I remember wanting.
But I'm not gonna do it. This should have sat with him for the rest of the episode, or at least until the very end of it. I don't know. It just didn't sit well with me that Stannis offers him what he's always wanted, and he immediately says he's not gonna do it. Part of it is Kit Harington's acting, because when Stannis gives him the offer, we get a push in on Kit Harington's face with some dramatic music, but his face doesn't really convey anything. It doesn't move, it doesn't do anything. And the music has to sell it as a big moment for that character.
I do think that already we're getting a lot more good stuff at the Wall than we've seen previously.
I'm all about that election scene. We get Sam standing up for Jon. That took so much out of Sam. Sam is such a coward.
Yeah.
He'll be the first one to admit it.
Yeah, for him to just like bust Janos's balls that way
Yeah.
is so fantastic, because Janos is the worst. And I think that Kit Harington does a really good job in the election scene, in the way that he casts his support for Malister with that little cup tap.
I'm not saying Kit's a bad actor. I just think in that one very pivotal moment, it was less than I wanted.
He doesn't get as much attention as a lot of the other cast members. But when you're, Ringo's still a Beatle.
Uncle Benjamin, I want to go to an octopus's garden.
I don't want to be a drummer. All I've got is a photograph. I thought that Maester Aemon casting his vote publicly for Jon was a little bit too much of a movie moment.
It was like 80s high school sports team movie.
For sure. It was like, put me in, coach.
I liked it still.
Yeah, no, you can't help but smile. And now we have Lord Snow.
Lord Snow.
So now his role with Stannis is going to be even greater.
One note just on the single scene between Varys and Tyrion.
Oh, of course. You can't have a Game of Thrones episode without Peter Dinklage.
They talk about kind of this us versus them mentality, you know, the rejects of society. Do you think Varys is more accepting of this reality because he's lived in it his entire life, whereas Tyrion was kind of shielded from it to some degree by his house and his family?
I think that Tyrion's always been accepting of it. I mean, think of his famous speech.
The bastards and broken things?
Yeah, so he's always understood his place, kind of. But Varys has seen a way to use it in a macro scale. Tyrion has always been able to manipulate his position on a micro level, usually for his own personal gain, but Varys has seen that there's a way to make big changes if you make the right choices, regardless of the hand you've been dealt. He makes a really good point by stroking Tyrion's ego a little bit, saying you were a very good ruler, which he was.
Yeah.
Tyrion saved King's Landing. There's no doubt about it. I think when you take into account the things that he was able to do working for Joffrey, when you extrapolate that ability to someone who's willing to take counsel like Dany, the potential that Varys sees is, you know, the sky's the limit.
All right, well, I think we covered everything in this great episode of Game of Thrones. Up next week, we have an episode called High Sparrow.
We've been introduced to the Sparrows. It sounds like next week we're going to delve even further into the religious conflict that is building in Westeros.
And I love me some religious conflict. Until next time, I'm James.
And I'm James.
And this has been What's on the Box? Get out of here. You love that video. Subscribe to them.
You who just watched this video, subscribe. What do you want from us?
A subscription. You have many videos to watch on this channel. Are you prepared to subscribe? All men must subscribe.